Superman in the history of thought. Along with the idea of hidden knowledge, there runs throughout the history of human intellect the idea of Superman. The idea of Superman is as old as the world. Through all centuries, through hundreds of centuries of its history, humanity has lived with the idea of Superman. Sayings and legends of ancient peoples are full of images of a Superman. Heroes of myths, titans, demigods, Prometheus who brought fire from heaven, prophets, messiahs, and saints of all religions. Heroes of fairy tales and epic songs, knights who rescue captive princesses, awaken sleeping beauties, vanquish dragons, and fight giants or ogres, all of these are images of Superman. Popular wisdom of all times and peoples has always understood that man such as he is cannot arrange his own life by himself. Popular wisdom has never regarded man as the crowning achievement of creation. It has always understood the place of man, and always accepted and admitted the notion that there can and must be beings who, though also human, are much higher, stronger, more complex and more miraculous than ordinary men. It is only the opaque and sterilized thought of the last centuries of European culture which has lost touch with the idea of Superman, and put as its aim man as he is, as he always was and always will be. In this comparatively short period of time, European thought so thoroughly forgot the idea of Superman that when Nietzsche threw out this idea to the West, it appeared new, original and unexpected. In reality, the idea had existed from the very beginning of human thought known to us. Superman has never completely vanished in modern Western thought. What, for instance, is the Napoleonic legend, and what are all similar legends but attempts to create a new myth? The masses in their own way still live with the idea of Superman. They are never satisfied with man as he is, and the literature supplied to the masses invariably gives them a Superman. What is the Count of Monte Cristo, or Rocambole or Sherlock Holmes but a modern expression of the same idea of a strong powerful being, against whom ordinary men cannot fight? Who surpasses them in strength, bravery or cunning, and whose power always has in it something mysterious, magical and miraculous. If we try to examine the forms in which the idea of Superman have been expressed through human thought in different periods of history, we see that it falls into several distinct categories. The first idea of Superman pictured him in the past, connected with legends of the Golden Age such as Merlin the magician or Druid. The idea has always been one and the same. People dreamt of or remembered times long past when their life was governed by supermen who struggled against evil, upheld justice and acted as mediators between men and some deity, governing them according to the will of the deity, giving them laws, bringing them commandments. The idea of theocracy is always connected with the idea of Superman. God or gods, whatever they were called, always governed people with the help and mediation of supermen, prophets, headmen, chiefs, kings, and emperors of a mysterious superhuman origin. Gods could never deal directly with men. Man never was and never considered himself sufficiently strong to look upon the face of the deity and receive laws directly. All religions begin with the advent of a Superman. Revelation always comes through some Superman. Man has never believed himself able to do anything of real significance. But dreams of the past could not satisfy humanity. They began to dream of the future, of a time when Superman would come again. From this a new concept of Superman resulted. People began to expect the Superman. He was to come, arrange their affairs, govern them and teach them to obey the law, or bring them a new law, a new teaching, a new knowledge, a new truth, a new revelation. This Superman was to come to save men from themselves as well as from the evil forces surrounding them. Almost all religions contain such an expectation of a Superman, an expectation of a prophet or of a Messiah. In Buddhism, the idea of Superman completely replaces the idea of the deity because the Buddha is not God, he is only a Superman. The idea of Superman has never been absent from the consciousness of mankind. The image of a Superman was shaped out of varied elements. At times it received a strong admixture of popular fantasy which brought it into conceptions arising from the personification of nature, of fire, of thunder, of the forest or the sea. The same fantasy sometimes united in a single image vague rumors concerning some distant people, either more savage or on the contrary, more civilized. Thus travelers' tales of cannibals were united by the imagination of ancient Greeks into the same imagery of the Cyclops Polyphemus, who devoured the companions of Odysseus. An unknown people, an unknown race was very easily transformed from myths into a single superhuman being. The idea of Superman in the past or in the present in unknown countries is always vivid and rich in content. But the idea of a Superman as a prophet or Messiah, of the Superman whom people were expecting, was very obscure. People had a dim concept of Superman. They did not understand in what way Superman would differ from ordinary man. When Superman came, people stoned him, burnt him at the stake, beheaded him or crucified him because he did not fulfill their expectations. Nevertheless, the idea did not die, and even in an indistinct and confused form it served as a measure by which the nothingness of man was measured. The idea was, however, gradually forgotten when man began to lose the realization of his nothingness. For a modern scientific view of the world, the idea of Superman stands apart as a sort of philosophical curiosity, and unconnected with anything else. Modern Western thought does not know how to depict the idea of Superman in the right tones. It always distorts this idea, it is always afraid of the final deductions from it, and in its theories of the future, it denies any connection with it. This idea towards the concept of Superman is based upon a wrong understanding of the idea of evolution. The chief defect of modern understanding of evolution has previously been examined. Superman, if he enters scientific thought, is regarded as the product of the evolution of man, although as a rule this term is not used at all and is replaced by the term, a higher type of man. In this regard, evolutionary theories become the basis of a naive optimistic view of life and of man. It is as though people said to themselves, now that evolution exists and now that science recognizes evolution, it follows that all is well and must in future become still better. In the imagination of modern man, reasoning from the point of view of the ideas of evolution, everything should have a happy ending. A story should necessarily end in a wedding. It is precisely here that the chief mistake with regard to the ideas of evolution lie. Evolution, however it be understood, is not assured for anyone or anything. The theory of evolution means only that nothing stands still, nothing remains as it was, everything inevitably goes either up or down, but not necessarily up. To think that everything necessarily goes up, is the most fantastic concept of the possibilities of evolution. All the forms of life we know are either the result of evolution, or the result of degeneration. But we cannot discriminate between these two processes, and often mistake the results of degeneration for the results of evolution. Only in one respect do we make no mistake. We know that nothing remains as it was. Everything lives and everything is transformed. Man is also transformed, but whether he goes up or down is a big question. Furthermore, evolution in the true sense of the word has nothing in common with the anthropological change of type, even if we consider such a change of type as established. Nor has evolution anything in common with the change of social forms, customs and laws, with the modification and evolution of forms of serfdom or means of warfare. Evolution towards Superman is the creation of new forms of thinking and feeling, the abandonment of old forms. We must remember that the development of a new type is accomplished at the expense of the old type, which is made to disappear by the same process of detachment. The new type being created out of an old one overcomes it, so to speak, conquers it and occupies its place. Nothing can occupy a step upon a stairwell unless it displaces something else already present. Nietzsche's Zarathustra speaks of this in the following words. Thus Spake Zarathustra, by Friedrich Nietzsche, published by Thomas Common in 1908, see prologue, page 11. I teach you the Superman. Man is something that has to be surmounted. What have you done to surmount man? What is the ape to man? A laughing stock or a sore disgrace. And just the same shall man be to the Superman, a laughing stock or a sore disgrace. Even the wisest of you is but a discord, and a hybrid of plant and phantom. Man is a rope over an abyss. A dangerous crossing, a dangerous wayfaring, a dangerous looking back, a dangerous trembling and halting. What is great in man is that he is a bridge and not a goal. What is lovable in man is that he is an overgoing and a downgoing. See page 13. End quote. These words of Zarathustra have not entered into our usual thinking. When we picture to ourselves a Superman, we accept and approve just those sides of human nature in him that should be discarded along the way. Superman appears to us as a very complicated and contradictory being. In reality, Superman must be a clearly defined being. He cannot have within him that eternal inner conflict, that painful inner division that men continually feel, and which they ascribe even to gods. At the same time, there cannot be two opposite types of Superman. Superman is the result of definite movement, of a definite evolution. In ordinary thinking, Superman appears as a hypertrophied man with all sides of his nature greatly exaggerated. This, of course, is quite impossible, because one side of human nature can develop only at the expense of other sides, and Superman can be the expression of one and only one very definite side of human nature. These wrong concepts of Superman are due in a considerable degree to the fact that ordinary thought considers man to be a much more finished type than he really is. The same naive view of man lies at the base of existing social sciences and theories. All these theories have in view only man and his future. They either endeavor to foresee the possible future of man, or recommend the best methods from their point of view, of organizing the life of man, of giving man all the happiness possible, of freeing man from unnecessary suffering, from injustice, and so on. But people do not see that attempts at a forcible application of such theories to life result only in increasing the amount of suffering and injustice. In trying to foresee the future, all these theories want to make life serve and obey man, and in doing so they do not take into account the real fact that man himself must change. People, believing in these theories, want to build without keeping in mind that a new master must come, and that a new master may not like what they have built or have begun to build. Man is permanently a transitional form, constant only in his contradictions and inconstancy, moving, becoming and changing under our very eyes. Even without any special study, it is clear that man is an unfinished being, different today from what he was yesterday and differing tomorrow from what he is today. So many opposing principles struggle in man that a harmonious coordination of them is quite impossible. This explains why a positive type of man is impossible. The soul of man is far too complex a combination of all the voices shouting in it to become united into one harmonious choir. All the kingdoms of nature live in man. Man is a little universe. In him proceed continual death and continual birth, the incessant swallowing of one being by another, the devouring of the weaker by the stronger, evolution and degeneration, growing and dying out. Man has within him everything from a mineral to God. The desire of God in man, that is the directing forces of his spirit, conscious of its unity with the infinite consciousness of the universe, cannot be in harmony with the inertia of a stone, with the inclination of particles for crystallization, with the sleepy flow of the sap in a plant, with the plant's slow turning towards the sun, with the call of the blood in an animal, with the three-dimensional consciousness of man which is based upon his separating himself from the world. On presenting his own eye to the world and on his recognizing as reality all apparent forms and divisions. The more man develops inwardly, the more strongly he begins to feel the different sides of his soul simultaneously. The more strongly he feels himself, the more strongly grows within him the desire to feel more and more, till at last he begins to desire so many things that he is never able to obtain at once all that he desires. His imagination carries him in different directions at the same time. One life is no longer sufficient for him. He needs 10 or even 20 lives at once. He needs to be simultaneously in different places, with different people, in different situations. He wants to reconcile the irreconcilable and combine the uncombinable. He wants to jump timelines at will continuously, hopping from one sensation to the next, from one circumstance to another, subject to whim and fantasy. His spirit does not wish to reconcile itself to the limitations of body and matter, to the limitations of time and space. His imagination travels infinitely far beyond all possibilities of realization, just as his emotional feeling travels infinitely far beyond the formulations and attainments of his intellect. Man outruns himself, but at the same time begins to be satisfied with imagination only, without attempts at realization. In his rare attempts at realization he does not see that he obtains things diametrically opposed to what he thinks he is approaching. The complicated system of the human soul often appears as dual, and there are serious grounds for such a view. There live in every man, as it were, two beings. One being comprising the mineral, vegetable, animal and human time and space world, the other being belonging to some other world. One is the being of the past and the other is a being of the future. But which is the being of the past, and which is the being of the future, we do not know. The past and the future find themselves in eternal struggle and eternal conflict in the soul of man. It may be said without exaggeration that the soul of man is the battlefield of past and future. Nietzsche's Zarathustra shares this interesting observation. I am of today and heretofore, but something is in me that is of the morrow and the day following and the hereafter, thus spake Zarathustra. Zarathustra, however, speaks not of the conflict, he speaks of the fullness that includes today and heretofore, tomorrow and hereafter, a fullness which comes when contradictions, multiplicity and duality have been conquered. The necessity for struggle against man for the attainment of Superman is what modern thought refuses to admit. This idea entirely disagrees with the exalting of man and his weaknesses, which is so characteristic of our era. At the same time, this does not mean that the idea of Superman plays no role. If certain schools of modern thought reject the idea of Superman or are afraid of it, others on the contrary are entirely based on this idea and cannot exist without it. The idea of Superman separates the thought of humanity into two sharply divided and very definite categories. Concepts of man without the idea of Superman, scientific, positivist concepts, and a considerable part of the philosophical concept of man. Concepts of man from the point of view of the idea of Superman, mystical, occult and theosophical concepts of man, though here it must be noted that almost everything that is known under these names is pseudo-mystical, pseudo-occult and pseudo-theosophical conception. In the first instance, man is taken as a complete being. Study is made of his anatomical structure, his physiological and psychological functions, his present position in the world, his historical fate, his culture and civilization, the possibility of better organization of his life and his possibilities of knowledge, etc. In all of this, man is taken as what he is. In this case, chief attention is focused on the result of man's activities, his attainments, his discoveries, and his inventions. In this case, the result of man's success are regarded as proof of evolution, although as often happens they demonstrate quite the contrary. The idea of evolution in this concept of man is taken as the general evolution of all men, of the whole of humankind. Mankind is regarded as evolving, although such an evolution has nothing analogous to it in nature and cannot be explained by any biological example. Western thought is in no way disconcerted by this, and continues to speak of evolution. In the second case, man is taken as an uncompleted being out of which something different should result. The whole meaning of the existence of this being lies in this case, in its transition into some new state. Man is regarded as a grain, as a lava, as something temporary and subject to transformation. In this instance, all that refers to man is taken from the point of view of this transformation. In other words, the value of everything in man's life is determined by the consideration of whether it is useful for this transformation or not. The idea of transformation itself, however, remains very obscure. The concept of man from the point of view of Superman cannot be regarded either as popular or as progressing. It enters as an indispensable attribute into semi-occult, semi-mystical teachings, but it plays no part in the scientific or in the more widely spread pseudoscientific philosophies of life. The reason for this, apart from everything else, is to be seen in the complete divergence of Western culture from religious thought. If it were not for this divergence, the concept of man from the point of view of the idea of Superman would not be lost, because religious thought in its true sense is impossible without the idea of Superman. The absence of the idea of Superman from the majority of modern philosophies is to a considerable extent the cause of the terrible chaos of thought in which modern humanity lives. If men tried to connect the idea of Superman with all the more or less accepted views, they would see that it shows everything in a new light. Presenting from new angles the things that they thought they knew quite well, reminding them of the fact that man is only a temporary visitor and a passenger on this earth. Naturally, such a view would not be popular. Modern philosophies, or at least a great number of them, are built upon sociology, or on what is called sociology. Sociology never thinks of a time so remote that a new type will have developed out of man, but is concerned with the present or the near and immediate future. It is precisely this attitude that serves to show the scholasticism of that science. Sociology, like any other scholastic science, deals not with living facts, but with artificial abstractions. Sociology, dealing with the average level and the average man, does not see the relief of mountains, does not understand that neither humanity nor individual man is flat and uniform. Humanity, as well as individual man, is a mountain chain with high snowy summits and deep precipices. Living in that unsettled geological period where everything is in the process of formation. When whole mountain ranges vanish, when deserts appear in the place of seas, when new volcanoes rise, when fields and forests are buried under the flow of boiling lava, when continents emerge and perish, and when glacial periods come and go. An average man with whom alone sociology can deal, does not exist in reality, any more than the average mountain height exists. It is impossible to indicate the moment when a new, a more stable type is formed. It is being formed continuously. Growth proceeds without interruption. There is never a moment when anything is accomplished. A new type of man is being formed now and amongst us. The selection goes on in all races and nations of the earth, except in the most backward and degenerating societies. The latter include the races, usually considered the most advanced, that is, those completely absorbed in pseudoculture. Superman does not belong to the historical future. If Superman can exist on Earth, he must exist both in the past and in the present. But he does not stay in life. He appears and goes away. Just as a grain of wheat, in becoming a plant, goes out of the sphere of the life of grains. Just as an acorn in becoming an oak goes out of the life of acorns, just as a caterpillar in becoming a chrysalis dies for caterpillars and in becoming a butterfly goes completely out of the sphere of observation of caterpillars. In the same way, Superman goes out of the sphere of observation of other people, goes out of their historical life. An ordinary man cannot see a Superman or know of his existence, just as a caterpillar cannot know of the existence of a butterfly. This is a fact that we find extremely difficult to admit, but it is natural and psychologically inevitable. The higher type cannot in any sense be controlled by the lower type, or be the subject of observation by the lower type. But the lower type may be controlled by the higher. From this point of view, the whole of life and the whole of history can have a meaning and a purpose that we cannot comprehend. This meaning, this purpose is Superman. All the rest exists for this sole purpose, that out of the masses of humanity crawling on the earth, Superman should from time to time emerge and rise, then by this very fact go away from the masses and become inaccessible and invisible to them. The ordinary view of life either finds no aim in life or sees the aim in the evolution of the masses. But the evolution of the masses is as fantastic and illogical an idea as would be, for example, the identical evolution of all the cells of a tree or all the cells of an organism. We do not realize that the idea of the evolution of the masses is equivalent to expecting all the cells of a tree, that is, the cells of the roots, bark, wood fiber, and leaves to be transformed into cells of flowers and fruit. That is expecting the whole tree to be transformed into flowers and fruit. Evolution, which is usually regarded as evolution of the masses, can in reality never be anything but the evolution of the few, and in mankind such an evolution can only be conscious. It is only degeneration that can proceed unconsciously in men.